So between our time in the Cinque Terre and Rome, we would drive through Tuscany. And while we were in Tuscany, we would stop in Florence, in Lucca, San Gimignano, Siena, Pienza, and Montepulciano. So let's start off in Florence. Florence is a little special for me because while I've been to most of Italy, I had never been to Florence. And Florence was my mom and dad's favorite place in Italy. So I was very interested to go, and especially now that my dad's gone, it holds a little bit of a special place for me to go visit now, knowing that he loved it so much. And if you're going to go to Florence, you're definitely going to want to go to the Accademia Gallery and the Uffizi Gallery. That's where all the art is. You're going to want to see David. You're going to want to see all the Botticellis and the Michelangelos and the Leonardo da Vinci. You're going to want to see all of that. It's worth seeing. I say that it's worth seeing, and that's self-evident, but allow me to confess and commit a little bit of a blasphemy. I've never been that impressed by the paintings, particularly these Renaissance era masters. I've just never been that impressed. I'm much more impressed by the sculptures. And I hate to say this, but Nate laughs at me when I said it then. I think there are innumerable, nameless, 14-year-old random girls who can paint better than these Italian masters. I know that's blasphemy, but I think it's true. There are random, countless teenagers who paint better than this now. And I know this was done in the 1500s, but I don't care. These people spent their lives dedicated to this craft, and it's good. It's far better than I can do. But part of the reason I'm not that impressed by it is because I'm so impressed by the stonework and the sculptures. Now that, to me, is impressive. Somebody who can chip away at marble and create David, or even these buildings. Look at the cathedral. Look at this stonework on the cathedral. To me, that is far more impressive than these painters. But it wasn't until 1450 or 1500 that any of those painters had any sense at all of the human body or perspective or grace in movement, the complexity, any of those things. It wasn't until around 1500 where you saw any of that. And I know I'm probably driving art people crazy, but I'm sorry, that's just the way I see it. The sculptures from the 4th century BC had more grace, more detail, more human anatomy. And you go from the bronzes of the 4th century BC up through the marble work of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th century AD. They're just better and infinitely more difficult in my mind. Much more artistic, much more impressive to me anyway. And I really hate to complain about the paintings because this is when they got good. I mean, this is the era when the paintings actually did start to get good. Before this, they were just, I'm sorry, but they were garbage. At least in this era, you had anatomy, grace of movement, 3 dimensions, perspective, things like that. Finally, an artist was able to see the world as it is, as opposed to just these weird constructs that they had before. So it was nice to see the Michelangelos and Leonardo da Vinci and Botticelli and things like that. They were actually nice to see. I still just find myself more impressed by the sculptures. And everywhere we went, our guides barely even referenced the sculptures. They only talked about the paintings. Heck, I found myself more impressed by this room than the paintings on the wall. I want to show you a 2nd century sculpture of Hercules. It's a Roman work copying a 4th century BC original bronze, but this was done in the 2nd century AD. That is impressive. And it's 1,300 years older than the paintings of the Renaissance that everybody's fascinated by. To me, that is far more impressive than any of the paintings I saw. And it's a nameless piece of sculpture in the corner. I don't know. I think I should probably phrase it as being much more impressed by the sculptures than constantly complaining about the paintings. And I'll surprise nobody by telling you that I was far more impressed with just the country as a whole, the ambiance, the food, and the culture. Those to me were really, really nice to get back into. Everywhere you went, there was just food, and it was great. We had such a good time trying new things and eating at random places. This is Mercato Centrale in Florence, which is a big, huge central market where you can buy pretty much everything. And we ate there in the market, got some sandwiches, and that's not a fancy meal, but it was the best part of the day. Just wandering around and looking at everything and trying things and eating what the Italians eat because they do know how to eat. And it was wonderful. A big shout out to my friend Johnny, who made sure to stress going to Mercato Central and eating some of this food. This is a Lampordetto sandwich, and we also had a porchata sandwich, and they were really, really good. But I think our favorite thing in Florence was our hotel. We had no idea anything about this hotel. We were just looking randomly for a decent location, and we found this hotel in Florence, and it was such a breath of fresh air from the last place because we didn't have good internet and a bunch of other things. But the food was the thing at the hotel. It was fantastic. We had steak Florentine, which is a huge, thick cut of steak. It was fantastic. Every meal, we actually kept eating at this place because the food was so good. And we really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. We just totally lucked out that this restaurant had such, or this hotel rather, had such a fantastic restaurant. And it made eating there easier than actually going out and trying to find a place to eat, which we did during the day. We would always go, hunt someplace down. But in the evenings, after being tired, it was nice that the best restaurant we found was actually right in our hotel. That was a big bonus. Lucca was a place that we went into almost blind. We really didn't do much research and didn't plan to spend a lot of time there, but we wanted to stop there. Brian had said how much he liked Lucca, and he's always focused on food, so we definitely put it on the list of someplace to stop and eat. And we just wandered around. We didn't do it like we did a lot of the cities. We didn't do a lot of research, didn't have a big plan. We literally just stumbled into it. Knew that we wanted to eat somewhere, but we were just going to wander around and check it out. And I definitely get the appeal. It was small, and there were a lot of people there. And there weren't major super impressive things to see, but again, with towns like this in Tuscany, that's not the point. You're not going to see the big massive Roman colosseums and the monuments. You're going for the ambiance and the food and that la dolce vita. You're looking to just have a good time, and Lucca is definitely a place for that. I can see why people would go there and spend a few days or a week just doing nothing but hanging out and eating good food and wandering around and having a coffee. But if that's not your thing, then towns like this are not for you. But if you can slow down and just relax, then yes, of course, that's the appeal to a place like this. San Gimignano is a little town known for its towers. And if you want to go down a rabbit hole of sleepy little places, picturesque and quaint, this is definitely one of those places.
Which is a big area in Tuscany. We have hills, some castles belong to province of Florence, other hills that belong to the province of Arezzo, Pisa, and Sicily. A lot of hills where they produce the Chianti wine. And then we have another Chianti.
I felt a little bad because our guide was really going on telling us all about the history of the place and how, you know, it's a medieval village and it was famous for its saffron and pecorino cheese, and the history of the place with trade routes and alliances with Florence and other cities. And while it's interesting, but to me, the place was just more charming for its appeal and beauty and how quiet it was. Of course, there's tourists around everywhere, like in everywhere in Italy, but this is definitely one of those places, again, even more so than Lucca, where you would just come and relax and hang out and eat and shop and have coffee and do all the Italian things. This is definitely a place like that. It was so appealing because it was just so cute. And at one point, apparently they had 70 towers and was a major trade route. Most of those are gone now, although you can still see some of them. Most of the people were wiped out during the plague, and like many towns in Italy of this size, they just never recovered. Some of the things that stuck out to me, other than just how quaint it was, were the views. It sits on a hilltop, and of course has quite a bit of elevation because of some of these towers and fortifications. So you got some really nice views over the edges of the cliffs of Tuscan valleys. You could see the, wineries and little villages in the distance, and that was really nice. A lot of these towns, of course, sit on hilltops. They were for fortification and defensive purposes. That's why they were built there. As a matter of fact, this little town has its name. It's named after a saint that supposedly saved it from being overrun by Attila the Hun. And that's where it got its name. But despite the guide telling us all about the history of the place, it was just the appeal, not so much of what it was, but what it is now. A quiet, sleepy little Tuscan village with beautiful views and beautiful buildings. There were artists who live here and sell their wares in little shops and wineries and cheese shops and cafes and restaurants. Everything you need, basically, to just spend some time in a little Tuscan village. And of course, the views set it off even more so than a lot of other little villages like this. Siena is very different. It's probably the perfect combination between small Tuscan village and Italian city. It still has the charm, it still has that small town feel, but there's also a lot of history and a lot of identity and a lot of culture and things to see. Here we are in Piazza del Campo, which is where they run this wild horse race twice a year. You've probably seen video of it or coverage of it. Hundreds of thousands of people come to this thing, and they run a horse race right here in this piazza in the middle of town. It's a crazy spectacle, but it's got history to it. The 17 contradas, which are the neighborhoods of Siena, all compete against each other. And everybody in Siena is a member of one of these contradas. They're like fraternities, but They're really neighborhoods. These contradas are medieval, and they still have that identity. You still see it everywhere you go. You'll see flags on corners denoting the difference between one contrada and another. And they hold that identity. And it's one of the things that gives Siena something extra. It's large enough to have all the beautiful buildings and the museums and things to see and go do, yet small enough to feel like a little town. As I said, to me, it's kind of the perfect combination of an Italian city or town. And like just about everywhere you go in Italy, the food was fantastic. They have great restaurants, and Siena's large enough to have quite a few restaurants, not just little cafes. But the food was fantastic, just world class. And somehow, I don't exactly know how, but it felt very peaceful. I mean, we were there in the middle of summer, late summer, and there were crowds everywhere we went. But look, here it is in the evening, and it doesn't feel like there are that many people around. There aren't. But this was a beautiful evening. You can stroll around the town. There weren't that many people out. That plays into what I was saying about it just having a feel of the perfect combination between a little village and a big town. It's almost like the same number of people that would be in San Gimignano or Pienza or Montepulciano are here, but the city is 10 times the size. But it's not packed or crowded like Florence or Rome or someplace, or Venice for that matter. It just had that great combination between feeling like a large city with a lot to see, yet at the same time feeling like that small town. And that is not an easy thing to do in Italy. Pienza is definitely a tiny little Tuscan village. There's not a lot to see or do here. That's part of the charm again. It's quiet, it's pretty, the views are wonderful, and it's a nice place to just wander around. You're not coming here to see big, huge, impressive sights. You're coming for the atmosphere. I would imagine that the people who stay in Pienza are renting an Airbnb and doing a whole lot of nothing and just looking to get away from some of the chaos and the madness. That would definitely be the appeal to a place like Pienza. When you stop rushing to tick off the monuments and start to just enjoy your surroundings and have experiences, that's when good times are had and good memories are made. There's a reason many of the people who come to Tuscany are more veteran Italian travelers and not first-timers. They've seen the big sights, and now they're looking to have experiences and to just enjoy themselves or learn something new or different. There are agri-tours and villa stays, cooking classes, wine tastings, and biking packages all throughout this area. And when Nate and I look back on Tuscany and ask what it was that we saw, I think we both kind of shrugged and thought, I don't know really. But it was also during this time that we had some of the funniest conversations and laughed the most. I remember particularly Nate complaining that the pasta was too hard everywhere we went. And of course, instead of trying to relate, I was just going to give him a bad time. So you're telling me that you can't get good pasta? Yeah. So you're telling me the Italians don't know how to cook pasta? And as he's laughing, he doubles down. Yeah, it's too hard. I said, you mean al dente, like it's supposed to be? And again, as he's laughing, I don't care. I don't want hard pasta. So you want mushy pasta. And every time we'd go to order pasta, Nate would make a special effort to find out if they could cook the pasta a little softer, which led to some hilarious interactions with waiters just not understanding. And even funnier dialogues between us, making up what the chef in the back was saying about these insufferable Americans who want mushy pasta. It was ridiculous, but it was fun. We were just having fun. And I think that is what Tuscany is about. Just enjoying life.